Hello everyone and welcome back to the Outdoor Channel. Behind me is a pretty heavily modified Silverado Trail Boss. It has been our project truck here, but as we're also an outdoor channel, it's also our tow vehicle. Some of our more notable modifications that we made to this is the addition of a BDS suspension lift kit. Now if you have what's kind of a standard Silverado or a Sierra, this would be a 6-inch lift kit. If you have a Trail Boss or an AT4, this would be a net 4-inch lift kit. And basically what that means, depending on how you option or buy your kit from BDS, it will either remove or mostly remove the stock 2-inch lift that came with the truck and replace it with that 6-inch lift kit, giving it a net of 4 inches. And as we've gone through and changed out most of our suspension parts on the truck, as you can imagine, it doesn't quite ride the same, and it certainly does not tow the same. Now there's a few different ways you can go about taking care of this. What we've chosen to do here is get some airbags for the truck. Now I've reached out to Rough Country and see if they wanted to sponsor the channel. They said no, so I went out and bought some of their airbags out of my own money, which means I'm going to give you a fair and honest review. Not that I wouldn't have done that anyway, but I'm going to tell you everything I like about these airbags and everything that I don't like about these airbags. All that's coming up next, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the outdoors. Welcome to the outdoors.
All right, this is what you're going to get when you order from Rough Country. In my case, we've got 2 separate boxes here, and we're going to go ahead and start to undo some of this and see what comes with. So it looks like we got a couple of spacers here. Now in my case, again, we've got a lifted truck. So depending on if your truck is lifted or it's not lifted or how high it's lifted, you may get something that looks like that. Some supplied hardware for those. Looks like a accessory guide of things to buy. The instructions. Kind of wish these were in color and the accessory guide wasn't, but that's what we got. Looks like airline. Brackets. And another bracket. And our airbags here. Here's a close-in shot of what the tops and bottoms look like. And the other one. Don't think they're size specific, so they should be the same. And what looks to be assorted hardware here. So we got our U-bolts. Some more mounting brackets. Everything from zip ties to nuts and bolts needed for the project. This is supposed to be a plate to shield the kit from your exhaust. I've done a little bit of the prep work off camera, as you can see here. Just kind of getting my bearings as to how this is going to work. And the reason for that is the instructions, well, they're not that great. It was pretty straightforward. I'm going to walk you guys through it step by step. First up, to take your airbag and take the side with the 3 holes on it. This one is going to be for your air fitting. These 2 are for your mounting hardware. And we're just going to put a few wraps around this. Go ahead and get that started there. Don't need to worry about the orientation of the 90-degree because that pivots. I'll show you that in a second. Just like that. Next, you can take your top mounting bracket. You can see this has a notch right here. That notch is for your nozzle, just like that. You just line up these 2 openings here with the top of the unit. You can see those there again. Now what I'm doing is taking my supplied hardware, lock washer, flat washer. The instructions again aren't all that clear about it. And then I'm also going to take a little bit of Loctite. Now you can use red, you can use blue, whatever your favorite one is. I happen to have red here in the shop, so that's what I'm using. Do the same with the other one. Lock in a flat. A little bit of Loctite. Little goes a long way. Now there is a torque specification for each of these. I'll come back and torque these up here off camera, but you guys get the idea. And when it's all done, should look something just like that. We're going to go ahead and flip this upside down. This is the bottom side we're putting up at the moment. And depending on, again, what your truck is, you may or may not have a set of spacers. Now, if it's stock, you won't have this. If you have a truck that maybe is taller than mine, you may have one of these that's a little bit taller. The orientation is pretty universal. I'm guessing that this fits a multitude of different trucks. But basically, we're going to take two of these positions on one of the sides here, and it's going to fit these two positions that are there. Again, taking the supplied hardware. A little bit of Loctite again goes a long way, and you kind of have to get it started and do something kind of like that there. And to show that again, just going to kind of drop it in here, something kind of like that, and then line it up with my hole, thread it in. And what I did find off camera is tightening up in the spot that's open versus the spot that's closed makes it a little bit easier to get those bolts in and out. Next is mounting the plate. Now they are specific, P for passenger, the other side says D for driver. The orientation is this P needs to line up with the same side as your air fitting here. So air fitting is facing towards the camera. The P is facing towards the camera. And basically it's just lining up the holes on the top. And this hardware is a little bit different. This has a flat top with an Allen key on here. And again, using some plied nuts. Go ahead and line these up and begin to thread them on. Again, don't forget your Loctite. Probably the easiest way I found is to take your nut, place it underneath, and then drop this flat bolt on top like that and begin threading it. These nuts have a little dimple on them, so the only way that you're going to be able to tighten this is with an impact. You're not going to be able to do it by hand. This little battery powered deal is sufficient. Just need to get it a little bit of a head start to get it going. One of the things that drew me to Rough Country is that we have to take a measurement. And on their website, it was really easy to take that measurement, understand what parts you needed to get. Again, this is a lifted truck, and so you'll hear me reference that as we go through the video process. But basically, the measurement has to go from the bump stop down to that plate that's down there. I'll show you how to do that in just a sec. To get that measurement, you'll need to come to the top of this cup here that holds your bump stop. Now in my case, I have this extra extension on here because we have a BDS lift. Again, you'll hear me talk about that throughout the process. But whatever you have, come up to here. Don't do the frame, up here. Really important. And come all the way down to the flat part of the plate. Now don't measure to this. If you have a Trail Boss or AT4s, you're going to have this extra plate here. This is going to get removed in the process. So don't measure to here. You'll have to come all the way down to where it's flat down here to get your measurement. In my case, it's about 10.5 inches. Once you've completed your assembly on the workbench, you'll need to come under the truck and remove that bump stop. One of the things we did find to be a little bit easier in our case is to first remove that plate that's down below. And once you remove that plate, it makes getting that hex that's holding the bump stop in place out a lot easier. The instructions do say that you should consider taking off the wheel, and you'll need a jack to bring the back of the truck up so you can fit the airbag between the axle and the frame. We have found that you don't need to take the tire off, but you can if you want. It won't hurt. You definitely got to raise up the back of the truck to get that airbag to fit in there though. And always as a precautionary, if you're taking your wheels off or having this up for any kind of work, make sure that you have your jack stands handy. Don't want to lose any digits. Supplied with the kit is a couple of carriage bolts. What's nice about carriage bolts is they have a square underneath the head, and that'll keep the bolt from turning as you're trying to tighten it down. And they also give you a couple of nylock nuts. And what's nice about these being nylock is you don't need to use any Loctite. Should secure itself, and we're going to go ahead and use these to secure the bottom plate. In order to be able to get to the nut that holds that carriage bolt in on the front side of the truck, there's a rail that's along the axle of the truck, and it protects a couple of brake lines. I'm not sure what else is in there. You're going to have to remove that rail, just a Torx nut that takes off 3 different bolts. Once you get that off, you'll be able to tighten up that last nut. It's right up in there. And once you get that tightened up, you can take this rail and you can put it right back. Okay, this is the U-bolt that comes with the kit. This is one of 4 of them. And this is the nut that comes with the kit. And one of the chief complaints is I can't get this nut onto this U-bolt. And the reason being is this is designed to be impacted on. So you're not doing this by hand. This is as far as it goes. And you're not doing it with a ratchet. Again, this is about as far as it's going to go. So if you don't have an impact, you're going to have a really hard time getting this nut on. Now, I've got this old trusted Craftsman impact I've had for a lot of years. It does work. I did use it earlier in the kit if you were watching earlier in the video, but the reality is this old Craftsman is probably a light or medium duty impact. It is not sufficient to get this on. So if you don't have a good impact, or you don't have one at all, or can't get one from a buddy, something like that, you're not going to be able to get this nut on this U-bolt. So instead, you can get a washer and a nylock nut, and you can put that on here. You can use a washer however you like, whether you want to use a lock washer, a flat washer, whatever you think is going to work best. And then you can use a simple drill to shore up that nylock nut on this. So the choice is yours. You can use the supplied hardware, but you'll need an impact, or you'll need to provide your own hardware, something like this nylock nut, maybe a washer or two, and secure your U-bolts to the frame of the truck. Alright, here's what the airbag looks from the underneath here, with all 4 of these U-bolt nuts started. You can see there's a wire harness that's there. Be sure when you mount your U-bolts that you're between the frame and that wire harness. Don't go over it, but go between. It may be a little bit biased towards the outside of the truck when you do that. That's okay. But it should look something just like this. Now, as you're doing these, just do a little bit at a time on each side. Just snug them up a little bit to make sure you have things aligned. And don't bend your U-bolts in the process. Here is the driver's side, and it's not really any different. Same basic process. You can see all the hardware mounted there. The only thing on this side is there is a bracket for some brake lines. And again, this one being a lifted truck, this has a relocation bracket that's here. You can see all the brake line hardware here. And it really interferes with the top of this bracket here, which is kind of a problem. Rough country doesn't give you any kind of relocation bracket for the relocation bracket. Again, they can't account for every possible scenario in every type of lifted truck. If you have a stock truck, this is probably a non-event, no big deal, but I don't want to do or have any undue stress on any of the brake lines that are up here. So at the moment, unfortunately, this is zip tied. I'm going to have to come back and fabricate some kind of plate so I can offset mount this to the frame of the truck, which is where it's supposed to be, again, without stressing any of the brake components here. Back over to the workbench. This is the heat shield. One of the bags is, I don't want to say close, but in the neighborhood of one of the exhaust pipes. And it looks just like this. Now you'll have to put a couple of bends in this tab right here. You can see I've done this one already. And you can just take a pair of simple pliers, get a decent grip on it, and just bend it down a little bit like that. And then work your way back a little bit and put a second bend, kind of like that. Doesn't need to be pretty, just so it looks like that. It comes with a couple of hose clamps. This is meant to go into here, something like this, which is why you put those bends in there, and this wraps around the exhaust pipe of your truck on both sides. Okay, here's the passenger side airbag, and here's the exhaust pipe. Just got a couple of these clamps started here, and really it's just a matter of positioning them and taking your plate working it on something like that. And once you get that in there, you can figure out if you want to move this up a little bit or down a little bit. That'll be up to you, but that's where it goes. Once you've gone through and verified that you're happy with your hardware, it's now a matter of running your air lines and hooking up your Schrader valves. Here are your valves. It's meant to be a press fit in and a pretty simple install. And they even give you this nifty cutting tool. Now running your lines is really wherever you want to run your lines. I'll show you what I did here in a second, but I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little extra room here and use the supplied cutting tool to go ahead and make a clean cut like that. And you want this as straight as you can. And it's really, like I said, a press fit into the airbag housing. And here's that valve that we installed earlier. See it moving around there. I'm going to go ahead and take my airline and press fit that in. Not coming out. What I see a lot of people do is they'll either borrow an opening like this on the license plate bracket, or they'll drill a hole somewhere here in the bumper or along the side here by the tag light. This is a pretty easy spot to get to, but if you're going to put your foot on here, you do run the risk of bumping into that valve and risk damaging it. Up here will be kind of nice, but there's a bit of metal behind this because, well, it's a bumper. So I decided to go somewhere else. There's the valve inside the fill area. I have one of them started, as you can see. it is out of the way. It almost looks like it belongs there, and we'll put the other one right next to it. From underneath the truck, you can see it routing near the fuel deck. And it has a couple of kind of natural places for it to get to the rear axle. And back to where we started, leaving some room here. You're not hitting this pin here for your leaf springs. You're not too close to your tire here. No real sharp bends where this could break and crack. Zip ties where you need them, and basically just run it up out of the way. And as you're going through and setting up your lines and tightening everything up, you can do what's called the soapy water test. Basically, place a little water with some soap on the fittings or anywhere in the line that might be suspect. And basically, if you got air bubbles, you got a leak somewhere, and you can go through and make any corrections you might need to. You don't need to go crazy with the zip ties, but definitely use a few more than what came with the kit. All right, we've got our air compressor charged. We've got our air line. We're going to go ahead and add some air to the system. The airbags have a rating between 5 and 100 psi. So we're going to demonstrate what the truck height is at basically no air pressure, or maybe it's 5 psi. We'll see what it looks like. And all the way up to 100 psi and maybe a couple different points in between, see what the height differences are. The second thing that we're going to do is hook this up to two different trailers. One's a boat trailer, one's a camper. Very different trailers, different weights, and see how much air pressure is needed to level out the truck. Before we do any of that, what I'm going to first do is tell you about some of the things that I really like about the system, some of the things I really don't like about the system. Again, I paid for this with my own money. I don't owe Rough Country anything, so I'm going to tell you what I think. A couple of things I like. The kit's all inclusive. You don't need to go and get anything else. You shouldn't have to go get anything else. We'll talk about that in a second. The airbags seem to be a decent quality. They're not something like cheap you get on Amazon. They work. Some of the things that I don't like about the system is you need to have an impact wrench. You should probably have one anyway, and I have one, but as you saw from the video, it was an old one. It's kind of a light to medium duty. It was not strong enough to get the hardware onto the U-bolts, so I had to go to the local AS Hardware, get my own lock nuts for this. Not a big deal, but something you got to think about. Either you have to get your own hardware, or you got to have a nicer impact wrench, at least to the one that I have. I liked that the hardware is protected by the top plate, specifically the 90-degree Schrader valve. The issue that I have with it is it's so close in that you can't get a wrench to service that valve. So after I installed everything, I found it had a leak. That's where my leak was. Couldn't get a wrench in there to tighten that valve. I actually had to remove the back from the plate, basically undo some of the work that I just got done doing to make sure that valve was seated correctly and I don't have any air leaks. Another thing I really did not like about it is the kit did come with the Teflon tape that you put around the threads of that valve. Your typical plumber's tape that's out there. It almost disintegrated. It wasn't really good. I had to go get my own tape. Of course, this is after I put the whole thing together and realized I got a leak. So had to take that tape off, put some different tape on there. And it wasn't anything special. This is tape I got from Menards, right? Retape it, reseat that valve, retighten it down. It's supposed to be hand tight, but you really had to crank that valve on there to get it seat without any leaks. To the point where I was almost like rounding off the corners. Something I wish Rough Country would improve on. The last thing, the instructions weren't great. I mean, this is a pretty easy install. You can kind of look at it and go, yeah, this is what I got to do with it. But a lot of money spent in the marketing manual that came with it. Full color, hey, we want to sell you stuff. The actual install, black and white, very, very vague, not all that helpful. I get some vagueness is probably okay because there's all kinds of different trucks that are out there. You know, you can't count for every different rig that's out there and every different lift that's out there, but they could be a little bit better. Here's a truck at, well, what stock height is for this particular truck. And you can see no air pressure. And because I have a negative offset wheel, can't really measure here, which is a really popular spot to measure because it sticks out too far to get a good measurement. So we're going to go to the back, go to my hitch here, and we're going to find that this is 24 1/2 inches. That's our starting point. All right, I've gone ahead and added about 100 pounds of pressure to each side. And you can see in my case, it's only going up about 1 inch. And that roughly 40 pounds, about 25, call it 25 1/4 to the top of the cap there. All right, moving on to the trailer test. This is our Lund 1875 crossover XS, just shy of 19 feet. Been a fantastic boat. If you've been following along the channel, you know we've been having fun with it. And we got a couple of good trips coming up this year up into Canada. But basically, this boat motor trailer, it's a tandem axle trailer, is 3,500 pounds, give or take, depending on how I have it loaded, with a 10% tongue weight. Should be around 350 pounds. However, we are at the start of the season at the time of filming this, so I don't have some of my electronics and batteries up at the bow. Probably be closer to 300 pounds, but we'll see how it does hooking up to the trailer, how much air it needs to make it sit level. Now my driveway is on a slight incline, so I'm going to get new baselines, and we'll figure out what the difference is basically if I'm at 25 inches or 26 inches to start with no air in the truck. And then it drops down 1 inch. We know we need to put 1 inch of, worth of air back into it to level it out. My baseline here is 26 inches. Again, my driveway's on a little bit of a slant. So we're going to see what this baseline compares to with the trailer on versus the trailer off. And with roughly 300 pounds of tongue weight, we would drop from 26 to roughly 25 3/8. And to get it back to 26 inches, in my case, took 45 pounds. Now for a camper, this is a Highland Ridge, part of the Jayco family. It's a 19 MBH, just shy of 24 feet. The dry weight's roughly 5,000 pounds and loaded up about 6,000 pounds. I think today we're probably on the lighter end of that. I expect the ton weight to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 pounds. Okay, when I started it, my baseline was 25. Putting the tape measure on it, we're about 23 3/4 roughly. So we've dropped 1 1/4 inches. All right, as you saw, with just over 70 pounds, we're able to get it back to just under 25, so it looks like a few pounds more. All right, I've gone ahead and done a little bit of back and forth with this. Looks like roughly 80 pounds is what I need to keep this rig level. I'm good to go. Now by this point, I've had the opportunity to drive this around for about a week or so, and most of that was local driving. A little bit of it was with that boat trailer that I showed earlier. I can say that it definitely improved the ride quality. You can see from what I'm showing here how much of a difference that it makes. Not going to say that it rides like a Cadillac or anything like that, but definitely a big difference. As far as how much air to put into the bags, that's going to depend very much on your particular rig. A stock truck will probably take a little bit less to achieve this. My truck, again, as you've heard me say a few times, is lifted. This is running at about 40 pounds without a load. All right, guys, that pretty much wraps up this install and review. Again, there's some things I really like about this kit, things that are pretty easy, intuitive, easy to figure out what you have to get, what you don't have to get. A couple things really don't like about the kit that I wish Rough Country would do a little bit better job. We did some testing with the truck without a load, did some testing with the truck with a load. Everything seemed to check out. It's going to work for me. Stay tuned, we got more content coming. We'll see you next time.